I'll never forget the chill of that morning. It wasn't the weather. It was something else. Something far colder than wind and rain, the kind of cold that seeps under your skin and into your bones when you realize the people you love have carved you out of their world. I woke to a dozen missed calls and 2 cryptic text messages from my cousin Mia. "I'm so sorry. They didn't tell you?" It took me a minute to make sense of her words. The world felt surreal, blurry. Like I was underwater and couldn't quite surface. I remember fumbling to call her back, and the second she picked up, her voice broke. "She's gone," she said. "Your mom passed away last night." The air was knocked out of me. "Where? How?" I stammered. "Why didn't anyone?" And then came the part that would fracture me in a way I didn't know was possible. "They buried her this morning. Your dad and your brother, they didn't tell you." My mind refused to accept it. I was her daughter. Her only daughter. I was supposed to be there. To hold her hand. To say goodbye. To place the last rose on her casket and whisper a final "I love you." But they, my own blood, had taken that from me. Without warning. Without reason, I stared at the wall for what felt like hours, the grief too big to fit inside my body. My mother was gone, and with her went the last flicker of warmth in our family. All that remained now was silence, betrayal, and an overwhelming question. Why? I replayed everything in my mind, every argument, every misunderstanding. But nothing justified this. Sure, I had distanced myself in recent years. I moved across the country, chased a life they didn't understand. But I never stopped calling her. I never stopped loving her. What kind of father, what kind of brother would rob me of that final moment? I didn't cry. Not yet. There was no room for tears in the cage of rage I found myself in. There was only the echo of a promise I made to myself that day: "They will regret this." Spent the next few hours spiraling. Pacing the apartment. Reading and rereading Mia's messages, scrolling through social media to find clues. That's when I saw it. A post on my father's Facebook. A blurry photo of the funeral. My brother standing next to the casket with a stiff face and my father's hand resting on his shoulder. There were over 100 comments: "So sorry for your loss. She was a wonderful woman. She raised 2 strong men. 2 strong men." No mention of me. No sign that I even existed. The erasure was so complete, it was like I had died instead of her. That was the moment the pain turned into something else. Something sharper. Something colder than even that morning. They thought they had closed the chapter without me. Buried her and locked me out of the story. But they didn't know what they had awakened in me. I booked a flight home that night. They had no idea what was coming. The plane touched down just after midnight. Hadn't been back in 3 years. The last time I stood on this soil, my mother hugged me so tightly I had to pry her arms off. She cried in the terminal as I walked away. Now, the woman who gave me life had been put into the ground, and I hadn't even been told. Every part of the city felt off. The lights dimmer. The streets quieter. Maybe it was just grief, making everything unfamiliar. Or maybe it was the knowing that just a few miles from here, in a cemetery I hadn't seen since childhood, she lay beneath the earth, alone. I didn't go to a hotel. I went straight to the house. My childhood home stood silent in the dark, its porch light casting long shadows on the lawn. The same creaky steps. The same paint-chipped door. Except now, it looked like a crime scene. And in many ways, it was. A crime of love withheld, of family fractured, of justice undone. I didn't knock. I stood there, breathing, fists clenched at my sides, wondering if I was ready. I wasn't. But I rang the bell anyway. Footsteps approached. The door creaked open. It was him, my brother. He froze when he saw me, like a ghost had materialized in front of him. Guilt surged across his face before he masked it with cold neutrality. "You shouldn't be here," he said. I laughed, dry and humorless. No, you shouldn't have been at her funeral. Not without me. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. It wasn't my decision. Don't lie to me, Nathan. He flinched at my tone. Dad thought it was best. You hadn't spoken to her in months. My hands trembled. That's a lie. I spoke to her last week. She told me. She missed me. She said she was proud of me. He looked away. I saw his jaw tense. That was all the confirmation I needed. They had made a choice. A deliberate, cruel choice. I'm her daughter, I said, voice breaking. You buried her without me. Do you know what that did to me? He didn't respond. Didn't even look at me. Just stared out into the dark like a coward. She asked for me, didn't she? Still silence. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. On her deathbed, she asked where I was. And you lied to her. He didn't deny it. He didn't have to. That silence was a confession louder than any words. I will never forgive you, I whispered, and then I turned and walked away, his guilt trailing behind me like a shadow. The next day, I went to her grave. The cemetery was empty, the sky gray with an almost theatrical sadness. I found her stone easily. Fresh earth. Clean marble. My name nowhere in sight. I collapsed to my knees. Hi, Mom. My voice cracked as I spoke. I told her everything. How sorry I was. How I would have given anything to be there. I read her the last text she sent me. Be safe, sweetheart. I love you always. I pressed my palm against the stone, and for the first time since Mia's call, I wept. Not quiet tears, full-bodied sobs that shook me to my core. I cried for the moments stolen, for the goodbye I never gave, and for the version of myself that died the moment they buried her without me. But as I cried, something shifted. My grief began to harden, not into bitterness, but into purpose. They wanted me erased. Forgotten. A ghost. But I would become impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about the funeral anymore. This was about justice. About truth. About memory. They could bury her without me, but they would never bury what I had to say. The silence in my rental car was unbearable. I just sat there after leaving the cemetery, gripping the steering wheel, my mother's voice echoing in my head. Not her literal voice, I didn't have any recordings of her, but that soft, melodic tone that used to lull me to sleep when I was 5, then lecture me when I was 15. And whisper comfort when I cried at 25. I thought I'd made peace by visiting her grave. I thought I'd laid something to rest. I hadn't. The betrayal was too loud. Her absence too heavy, and something didn't add up. I drove through the old neighborhood, memories flooding every street corner. There was the gas station where she used to buy me slushies after school. The cafe she loved. The library where she taught me how to read. Every place screamed her name, and in every memory, my father and brother were either absent or tense. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to all this, not just hurt feelings. Not just family distance. A secret. A choice. A cover-up. I decided to go see Mia. She lived in a small apartment on the south end of town. When she opened the door, her face dropped like she'd seen a ghost. You look like you haven't slept, she said. I haven't, I replied. Can I come in? She hesitated, glanced behind her, like she wasn't sure this was a good idea, then nodded and let me in. Sat in her cramped kitchen, everything dim except for a flickering light above the sink. Got straight to the point. Why didn't they tell me she was dying? Mia sighed, rubbing her temples. I wanted to. I swear to you, I begged Uncle Robert to call you. He wouldn't listen. Why? She hesitated again. Then, because of the letter. My chest tightened. What letter? The one your mom wrote for you. A month before she died. She gave it to him, your dad. Told him to send it to you if she passed suddenly. He told me he'd send it. But now I don't think he ever did. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. He has it? I asked, barely able to breathe. Mia nodded. I'm sorry. I didn't know until the funeral. I overheard them talking about it. Him and Nathan. I stood up. I need that letter. Wait, where are you going? Home, I said. I'm done waiting for them to do the right thing. It was just past midnight when I pulled up to the house again. The porch light was still on. I didn't knock this time. I still had a key. Buried at the bottom of my wallet, taped behind an old photo strip of me and Mom laughing at the fair. I had kept it all these years, mostly out of habit. Now it would open the door to the truth. Let myself in quietly, the familiar creak of the hinges betraying me. The living room was empty. Dim, quiet. But everything was still exactly the same. The couch. The bookshelf. Her ceramic angel collection on the mantelpiece, one for every year of my life until I left. I walked to the study. My father's sacred space. IT was locked. I knew the code. Mom's birthday. He was always predictable. Inside was a file cabinet. The top drawer, locked too. I looked around, then checked the bookshelf. Third one on the left, behind a copy of Moby Dick. That's where he kept the emergency key. Some things you never forget. My hands shook as I opened the drawer. Bills. Deeds. Insurance policies. And then, tucked between a manila folder and an old photograph, I found it.an envelope.my name on the front in her handwriting. I stared at it for a long time, and my fingers trembled as I opened it.my. Sweet girl, if you're reading this, I'm no longer in this world. I hope it wasn't sudden. I hope I had time to say goodbye. But just in case I didn't, I want you to know a few things. First, I love you. You were never a disappointment to me. Never. I know your father and brother made you feel like your choices distanced you from this family, but they were wrong. You were always brave, always bold. I admired that more than I ever said. Second, I'm sorry. I didn't fight harder. Toward the end, I was too tired. Too sick. I wanted peace. But I see now, in waiting for peace, I allowed cruelty to take root in this house. There's so much I wanted to tell you. About what happened after you left. About the way your father changed. About Nathan and the business, and how I tried to protect what little I had left for you. But they wouldn't let me. They controlled everything. That's why I wrote this. There's a box in the attic with my journals and the deed to the old cabin by the lake. It's yours. I never told them. They think it was sold. I wanted you to have something untouched. Something they couldn't corrupt. Please don't let them make you doubt who you are. You were my light. My wildflower. My reason. Love always, Momi. Read it 3 times, tears falling onto the paper. She had known. She had seen what I was only now uncovering. And even in her final days, she had fought quietly, but fiercely, to leave me a legacy. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my childhood home, letter clutched to my chest, and made a new promise. I will not let this end here. There was something buried deeper than her casket. A truth. A betrayal. And now I had a reason to dig. The attic was just as I remembered it, dusty, cramped, and hot, with that strange wooden smell of mothballs and old secrets. I climbed up slowly, flashlight in one hand, my mother's letter in the other. I half expected the box to be gone. Maybe they'd found it. Maybe they'd destroyed it. But part of me knew better, and why mother was smart. And careful. And underestimated, just like me. I found the box beneath a tarp, behind an old trunk of Christmas ornaments. It was heavier than I expected, metal, not cardboard. There was a small combination lock on the front. It took me 3 tries before I realized it was my birthday. The latch clicked. Inside were her journals, bound with ribbon. A faded photo of her holding me as a baby, smiling in the sunlight. A deed of official, notarized, to a property I didn't even remember. And letters. So many letters, each one addressed to me. One for every birthday I had spent away. I couldn't read them all at once. I didn't have the strength. So I picked the one marked age 30, the one she must have written recently, weeks before her death. My darling girl, I wonder where you are today. I wonder what city you're in, what dreams you're chasing. I hope you're smiling. I hope the world is treating you better than your own family has. There's something I need to confess. Something you deserve to know. After you left, your father and brother changed. Or maybe they'd always been that way, and I just stopped making excuses. When I got sick, I thought it would bring us closer. But instead, they tightened their grip on the house, on the money, on me. Your father didn't want to spend on treatments. Said it was pointless and prolonging the inevitable. But you would have fought for me. I know that there were days I wanted to call you. To scream. To beg you to come home. But I was afraid they'd intercept it. Or worse, punish you for caring. They didn't just keep you from my funeral. They erased you from my dying days, but I never forgot you. You were always my light, love. Mommy hands were shaking when I finished reading. I was right. This wasn't just about grief. This was theft. Suppression. Control. They hadn't simply left me out of the funeral, they'd made a conscious, cruel effort to cut me out of her entire death, and probably her will. I took photos of everything. The deed. The journals. The letter. Then I packed the box in my car and drove straight to the county clerk's office at 8 a.m. the next morning. It took 2 hours of navigating bureaucracy and a pitifully apathetic receptionist, but eventually, I got a copy of my mother's will. As expected, my name wasn't there. The beneficiaries? My father. And Nathan. I laughed bitterly in the middle of the government building. The kind of laugh that carries pain inside it like a poison, but there was something odd about the filing date. It was recent, too recent. Dated only 3 weeks before her death. Something inside me clicked. She was barely conscious then. According to Mia, she hadn't even been able to speak some days. So how could she have updated a legal document? I called a lawyer that afternoon. She was blunt. Sharp-eyed. The kind of woman who didn't blink when I told her I suspected fraud. You're not the first to have family forge a signature in the final hours, she said. But if what you're saying is true, and we can prove she was incapacitated, we can challenge the will. But I don't want the money, I said. I want the truth. She smiled. The truth always costs someone. That night, I went back to the house one last time. I knew they'd be there. Nathan opened the door. His expression dropped into something colder than fear, annoyance. Back again? Where's Dad? I asked, pushing past him. He grabbed my arm. You don't live here anymore. You can't just. I shoved his hand off. No, I don't live here. Because you made this house a tomb. My father appeared in the hallway, older than I remembered. Thinner. Paler. But just as distant. You found the box, he said. No question. Just fact. You lied to me, I replied. It was for your own good. My good? You buried her without me. You changed her will. You forged her signature. He didn't flinch. It was time to move on, he said. You were never coming back. And that gave you the right to erase me? You chose your path. We chose ours. My fists clenched. No. You chose for me. You robbed me of goodbye. You robbed her of peace. Then I pulled out a copy of the letter and tossed it on the table between them. She didn't forget me. She left me everything. Her journals. The deed. Her final words. I have them all. Nathan's eyes widened. And now I have a lawyer. My father's voice dropped. You would tear this family apart over revenge? I looked him dead in the eyes. This family was already broken. I'm just digging up the pieces. I walked out and slammed the door behind me. Outside, the air was still. Quiet, but inside me, a storm was rising. The truth had been buried once, wasn't going to let it stay that way. The courthouse smelled like cold paper and quiet betrayal. I sat at the long wooden table beside my lawyer, clutching the ribbon-bound journal my mother had hidden for me. The one with her handwriting, looping, steady, unmistakable. The one they tried to bury along with her. Nathan sat at the other table, lips pressed thin. My father, blank-faced beside him, looked at me as though I were a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe the girl they remembered, the one who stayed quiet, who obeyed, who left without a fight, had died with Mom. The judge read silently through the letter I'd submitted, the one my mother wrote to me for my 30th birthday. The room was silent. Then she looked up and asked the question I had been preparing for. Do you believe the signature on this will was forged? I looked straight at her. I don't believe it. I know it. A pause, and I can prove she was no longer able to sign anything at the time this will was filed. She was on morphine. She was nonverbal. I have her medical records. I have the hospice nurse's testimony. I have Mia's sworn affidavit. And I have this. I slid the journal across the table. She wrote this 2 months before she died. It details everything. How they controlled her finances. How they isolated her from me. How she tried to leave me something in secret because she knew what they would do. The judge examined it closely. Nathan's lawyer stammered something about intent and family matters, but it didn't matter. The truth had already cracked the mask they wore. And once the cracks begin, everything falls. And why father didn't say a word, not once during the entire proceeding, not even when the judge ruled in my favor, didn't take the house. I didn't want the money. I asked the court for one thing, to restore her original will. The one that left me the cabin by the lake, the place she said was untouched, sacred, ours, and I got it. The rest went to probate. And the lawyers would sort it out. I didn't care, wasn't there for vengeance, I was there for her. The cabin was smaller than I remembered, hadn't been there since I was a teenager, back when Mom would take me for long weekends, just the two of us, away from the tension, the silence, the unspoken war at home. It was our escape. Our secret garden. Unlocked the door with the old brass key from the journal and stepped inside. Dust floated in the sunlight like suspended time. Everything was still there, her favorite chair, her books, the floral teacups she never let anyone else use. There was even a jar on the mantel labeled wildflower seeds. I laughed through tears. She had saved everything. It wasn't just a cabin. It was her memory in a house. A museum of the love no one else could kill. I stayed for weeks. I cleaned. I read every letter. I planted those seeds. I let myself grieve, and for the first time since I got Mia's call, I finally stopped asking why they did what they did. I stopped trying to rewrite the past. They had buried my mother, but I had unearthed her love. A month later, I hosted a memorial of my OWN and no headstones. No cold pews. Just a dozen people who knew her, who loved her, some I hadn't seen in years. Former students. Friends from her book club. Even Mia, who drove 2 hours to be there and brought an old recipe card with Mom's handwriting on it. We read her letters. We laughed. We cried. We played her favorite song, Joni Mitchell, of course, and then I stood up, holding one of the journals. She didn't get the goodbye she deserved, I said. So today, we give it to her. Together. Everyone wrote a short note and placed it inside a wooden box. We buried it beneath the maple tree outside the cabin, the one I used to climb while she watched from the porch, cheering me on, calling me her fearless girl, and for the first time, I felt peace, real peace, not silence. Not numbness, but wholeness. The months have passed. I live here now. At the cabin. I write. I tend to the garden. I've even started volunteering at the small library in town, just like she used to. Sometimes I still hear her voice, when I make tea. When I brush past her old scarves in the closet. When I sit on the porch as the wind stirs the trees, I can almost hear her whisper, "You made it home." And I did, not just to this place, but to myself. They tried to bury me with her, but I rose from the grave they dug, stronger, louder, impossible to erase.